I'm Amy Dolan, and this is the Feeding People podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Feeding People podcast. I'm your host, Amy Dolan. So happy to be with you tonight at the table for a very special episode of the podcast. I have one of my greatest, bestest, loveliest friends here at the table tonight, and I'm so excited for you to meet her. As always, we thank you so much for listening to the show and for rating and reviewing and subscribing. All of that is so helpful to us in the second season. You can listen to our show, as always, wherever you listen to podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, all of the places. We're everywhere. Tonight at the table, I have the one, the only, Dr. Sarah Deardorff Miller. Welcome.
I feel like I should be like jumping up and down, doing like an NBA entrance or something.
That was like a very long, drawn out intro. Did you like that?
I loved it.
Like when you go home at night, is Sean like, here she is, Dr.
That would be amazing. Every time I came in the door, people were like, and now your starting lineup. That would be amazing.
Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me.
We had such a lovely dinner. I always
delicious.
say that. Oh my gosh, this is hilarious. Actually, I always say that. I made the dinner.
Like tooting your own horn. But
it
really was
most
delicious
dinner.
I think you should celebrate if it was good.
You're the best dinner guest. Everyone should have Sarah over for dinner because
please do.
I was like, what do you want in the salad? And you were like, everything.
I'm good at eating.
You're great at eating.
I'm a good
I think
eater.
Julia Child said the best people are the people who like to eat.
I passed that with flying colors.
Right? Exactly.
I won that one.
You're so complimentary.
It was really good, though. It was delicious.
We had such a nice dinner. We got to catch up on everything, which was so nice. And now here we are.
And your dog Maddox loves me. So
my dog
I'm not
Maddox
trying to brag,
loves
but
you.
I feel like that's got to be a character test, and I passed it. So
Absolutely.
I'm
I
ready.
feel like, we didn't have a dog for a very long time, and we watched you with your beautiful dogs, Lucy and Wrigley. And I feel like that was really motivating to us because
they make your worlds that much more joyful.
They really do. And we saw you with your dogs and we wanted that. So I love that Maddox
puppies.
loves you.
He's a good dog.
Okay, so we've known each other a long time now. We were thinking it was 2006 when we met, right?
I think so.
Okay, so I want to tell the story about how we met. We were living in the suburbs of Chicago, and your now husband, Sean, was your just new boyfriend, right?
Yeah, because that's not complicated enough. We could do the whole podcast on that.
Okay, so we started attending a new church in the suburbs, and Sean was one of the pastors, and we met with him. We were like, oh my gosh, I remember
Who
these
is this
days
crazy young guy?
when we were like actual good church attendees, and we were like, we're attending a new church. We should meet with the
you
pastor.
guys were awesome. You didn't just wander in. You were intentional about
yeah.
your approach to getting in the community of this new suburb, and
That's
you guys
nice
were
of
kind
you
of
to say.
newlyweds too, weren't you? Only a couple of years.
Sort of, but we were church nerds. So
You
we
were
like,
church nerds.
We should meet with the pastor. So we met with Sean, and he was so awesome. He showed us all the ways of
He's a keeper.
Presbyterian world. We knew nothing. And then everyone was like, do you know Sean's girlfriend, Sarah? And we were like, no, where is she?
Who's this crazy lady?
And where were you?
I think I was in Tanzania.
You were in Tanzania. And so I just felt like you became this urban legend almost. People would ask us all the, you're friends with Sean? Do you know his girlfriend? I'm
but it was probably more
where the heck is this girlfriend in Tanzania?
I know.
What's happening?
But it was probably more because that was the church I'd grown up in, and my dad was the pastor there, and then Sean came. So yeah, I was this crazy person who had spent their whole life in that church, and then went away, and then dating the pastor.
It is a really good story.
I don't know. I feel like I always need to clarify that when I say I grew up a pastor's daughter and I married a pastor, I need to clarify that that's two separate people because I'm that sounds really weird when I say that. So yes, Sean became the associate pastor
Yeah.
at the church where my dad was a pastor.
Yeah.
And where you guys were just starting to come.
But then you came home from Tanzania and we did meet you and we're like, she's real. And
She is indeed.
and so wonderful. Like you were everything that people had told us. And like I just remember like loving you from the first minute I met you because you're just you all the time. Like you never
nice.
have another level. And I'm always trying to work on like not projecting an image, like being more vulnerable, all that. And you're just always you.
Oh,
and
I don't know if that's true, but thank
you
you.
like bring
That's
that out
really
in me.
sweet.
And so anyway, we loved you from the minute we met you and knew that you were
I
real.
remember first meeting you guys too. It was like, yes, like new young friends. And we like just decided you had to be our friends. Like we didn't really give you a choice.
Yeah.
So, and it was so fun.
And it was fun for
We had a
that
good
like
time.
little blip. I feel like it was maybe a year or two when you got married and then lived like right by us in the
know.
suburbs.
In our little downtown.
That was so nice.
It was fun.
That was a good time. So how would you describe yourself?
Oh, gosh.
Who are you, Sarah?
I know. I really do need to lay on a couch. This is like a shrink. Did I apologize yet for my stuffy sounding voice? 'Cause
No,
I'm
you sound great.
Post colds, but okay. Well, I don't always sound like my raspy voice here, but I don't know. I mean, okay, so you described kind of like my original church background. So I think the church has always been a big part of my life. But yeah, now I live in Greenwich, Connecticut, outside of New York City, which oddly enough, you knew before I knew
You're
because
so
you were
fancy.
doing a consulting gig there, which is so interesting. And my husband, Sean, is the pastor at Greenwich Presbyterian Church. And I have kind of a mishmash professional world. I should also back up. I have two little ones. Hannah, my daughter's 5, and my son Drew's 2. So they kind of fill our world a lot. We used to have 2 doggies, which you just talked about, but they died last year, 2 separate cancers, which was really sad. But so our house does feel a little more empty, but it's plenty busy with the 2 little ones. And yeah, we've been there for about 3 years. We're liking it out there. I think, like we've kind of started building our home base there. And I do refugee related work. So like you said, I have the doctorate in front of my name, which feels so weird to like.
Sorry, I
toot
just
my
need to
own horn.
interrupt. Where's your doctorate from exactly?
Oh, a little place called Oxford.
Yeah, it
Amy
is.
told me I'm supposed to be braggy, so I'm going to be braggy. No. So I did do my doctorate at Oxford.
Yeah, you did.
In international relations, and I focus on refugees and forced migration. And so I've had kind of an interesting career path where I try to bridge I like the academic side, keeping my foot in the academic world, because it gives me this opportunity to do kind of the deeper thinking, the critical analysis, asking the tough questions and digging in on research. But I also like to stay connected to the real world. And so I do a lot of consulting with either the UN or different organizations. I used to work with World Relief, which your dear hubby Kelly has worked with. And that was doing refugee resettlement. I've done work with the International Rescue Committee, Mercy Corps. I've got a couple different gigs right now. I'm doing some work on Venezuelan displacement. And then the biggest thing I'm working on right now, or that I'm connected to right now, is I'm a fellow at Refugees International, which is a cool organization in Washington, D.C. And they do research and advocacy. They have advocates who go on mission and then collect research and data and then come back to Washington and do advocacy about different refugee crises and situations around the world. So that kind of lets me stay focused on the real world, like still kind of try to have some policy impact, but then also still do the deeper thinking I like to do in academia, which is this interesting hybrid. And I also feel like this type of subject matter, you can't just be intellectually curious. I mean, you can't be curious about human suffering, right? Like you have to hope that somehow the work you're doing is contributing toward better solutions and somehow a step closer. So that's where, as much as I do love, some of the teaching I do at the university and stuff, I always want to have that link to the real world, and more specifically to the actual real people that we're talking about, so you don't get kind of disconnected from that.
That's what I love about you. It's so great that you said that. I feel like this whole show I'm just going to keep saying this is what I love about you. Like you're the smartest person I know, literally. You're just so smart.
You're giving me way too much credit.
But also like you're just so great relationally, and I just love that you said that, because what would the academic work is important, of course, but like if that's not connecting to real people's lives and relationships and really affecting people who need help, like what does it matter, right? Like it somehow has to all come together, and that's just like such a description of who you are. You're like both of those things, always caring about the people that you're also researching and advocating for and setting policy and all that. So it's
really
really
it's
cool.
tricky too, because like any career field, like it's easy to get pulled into the like, I want to climb the ladder. I want to make my CV look better. I want to put out this awesome publication that's going to look great. You know, like just the other day I caught myself, somebody had just put out a report and I wrote back and I was like, this looks awesome. And then I had to correct myself because on the cover was this like really horrific picture of like people really suffering. And I was like, here I am like cheering them on in this awesome publication. And it was, and so of course I was talking about the hard work they had done, not the actual human suffering.
Yeah.
But the point is, you know, we are building our careers off of these really terrible situations. And so keeping, you know, a close connection to what we're actually trying to achieve. And I feel like there's a lot of people that I've been able to look up to. I mean, both in my profession, there's been mentors that I've looked up to who've really stayed dedicated to the actual people that we're serving. And then in other professions too. I mean, like you're a perfect example. Like you're doing things like that too. I mean, you're striving to connect with people and relationally.
But like not with a doctor from Oxford. So let's be clear.
Well, that's just dressing. I mean, like that's just, you know, okay, fine. But
you're right though. But I mean, that's what it is. And I mean, that's what we're all, I hope that like on the best days of humanity, that's what we're all really doing, right? Is like caring for ourselves and caring for each other.
Amen, sister.
And so if we're not doing that, what are we really?
We're done.
Okay.
Whole podcast set.
That was basically church, everyone.
That was awesome.
Okay, so you are
with you.
so impressive. I want to get, so this is what we're going to talk about today. I want to get to this because you're an expert in refugee work and immigration. And so I want to get to that in a minute, and specifically like the role of food and gatherings and hospitality for refugee communities. But before we get to that, I want to know first, what was food growing up? What was it like for you growing up in your house? Like, I know your parents, and I really want to hear like a really great story about your parents.
I love that.
Because
my parents are so funny.
So awesome.
Oh, you're so sweet.
But like, what was food growing up for you? Did you cook? Did someone in your family cook?
Yeah.
Did you go out? Did you stay home? What was it like?
I love food. I'm not one of those girls who's like, I don't want to have seconds. I'm like seconds, thirds. Like I'm not shy about that. No, I had a happy food childhood. My mom was always the cook. My dad literally, like there was a short period where like my mom was sick. She had like a heart attack, and like my dad was in charge of, and she's fine, but my dad was in charge of like the eating. And I just remember like he tried to like make us ramen noodles, and then like he was trying, and like he had it like it was all like one long noodle, and like he hadn't like crunched them before, and he took scissors out and he was like trying to cut it as we took bites, because like he wasn't, and like we have all, and like otherwise all he could make was peanut butter and jelly, to the point where like peanut butter and jelly was his favorite. Like somebody at church like knit him a little, they like crocheted a little picture that said like happiness in life is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like, and that was in his office for years. So that's my dad. My mom was always the cook, and she made great food, like good kind of home style type food. She grew up the oldest girl of 8 on the farm in South Dakota, big dairy farm, Dutch family. And from a young age, because my grandma would be out working on the fields or like working somewhere else, my mom was in charge of like making breakfast for like all her siblings.
Wow.
And like, well, actually it was 10 kids. I mean, 2 had passed away, but yeah, so she was always like kind of the short order cook. And so like the only downside of that is like we always defaulted to my mom. Like I was never like taking over and like cooking. So I don't feel like I started doing any cooking until I was really an adult, because I would always just default to like, my mom will do it. She can do it so fast. She can do it. I was always impressed by people who can hold the knife in that certain way when they slice vegetables.
Yeah.
Not just the fast chop,
My
but
mom
like
did that
with
too.
the thumb where it like rubs against your thumb.
Yes.
And I'm like, how do you not slice it up? Well, actually my mom doesn't have thumbs, but that's not the reason. But no, I'm always impressed like with those kinds of moves.
Yes.
And and I would always remember watching my mom. But no, I mean, it was always great fun. Like, you know, we could come and like lick the batter and all that stuff. And so she would make, you know, just like your standard like American type meals. We were never like crazy out there. It wasn't until I dated Sean that I like tried sushi. And but at the same time, like my parents were really well traveled. They'd gone all over the world, so they weren't shy about trying different things. But no, we had a very like kind of happy food childhood. Yeah.
And so even like, would you say that contributed to your love of food now, and you've traveled everywhere? Like, were you always an adventurous eater even when you traveled? Or do you feel like you grew into
medium
that?
adventurous eater? Yeah, like when I went to Thailand, I ate a bug and, like all the stuff you're supposed to try doing in the market. Like I did it. It was crunchy. It was protein. But no, I mean, I think like we were always just kind of like solid like upper middle class, so I never like something like sushi was always like super fancy, and I don't think that ever hit our radar. Like we growing up, it was more like we're gonna do the Olive Garden Chili's route, which was delicious, and like give me 100 breadsticks and a pile of salad, and
they will.
Oh yeah, and my parents will ask for like to-go boxes. My dad will like put them like in a napkin. Like,
do you see how hard Kelly's laughing right now at my joke? That was worth it.
Oh, you already referenced Kelly. No, but I think like totally like any like hotel breakfast or anything. My mom would like. She would be so mad if she listens to this. She'd like bring baggies to like have in her purse so we could like fill it to like make our lunch.
I know.
And like it was not even like we were too poor to buy lunch. It was just the idea that like we were going to
like the challenge of it.
Right. Like take the Kaiser roll and the little like cold cuts from the German breakfast, and that's going to be your lunch, And so we would, but then like it was always this kind of game about like how sneaky you could be to like get it in the bag. And like, you don't want them to see. I'm sure they all knew exactly what we were doing, So like, it'd be like, and then like suddenly your plate's empty and you have to go up for another round.
I ate that so fast.
And it was so funny. I still get like nervous, but I still save like, and Sean literally is like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I have a baggie in my purse. So we were thrifty, I guess. But no, we always had good.
Did your mom
memories.
growing up, when she would cook for so many people on the farm, because it was only you and your sister in your family, was it like she always made large portions, or was it just for her?
Probably because my dad was such a big eater. I mean, it was always like one of those, like all the food would end up at his end of the table.
Yes.
No, I mean, I think we never, like, there are people who I won't mention who like never make enough food, and that's like really stressful and exhausting to be at someone's house and be like rationing. That's my issue with tapas, by the way. Like I
am not a fan of tapas at all.
Like I love how they taste. Like they're delicious, but I'm so stressed when I go out because it's never enough food. And then you're doing this like math, you're like doing fractions. You're like, okay, well, he had 2 pieces and she only had 1, so he definitely shouldn't get another one. And then I should only have a half, and maybe we should split, and like, should we order another? And like, it's expensive. Tastes delicious. I have no issue with how the food tastes, but it's never enough. And so unless we're going to order like a mountain of tapas, I don't want to do it because
this is going to be a whole other episode. FYI.
Tapas?
I've never had an opportunity to express my thoughts on tapas before. This is so lovely. Bring it. I'm exactly the same. It's way too stressful.
Refugees.
And also, like, why would you want one bite of anything?
I know.
If you're with a group and you're trying to figure out how much, it's just so
That's why Spaniards are so skinny,
stressful.
I guess. But
okay. Yeah. Okay.
No, it's
you're thinking stressful. How you could have had a giant bowl of like pasta or steak,
fettuccine Alfredo for like 7,000 calories.
Okay.
No wonder there's an obesity problem in the United States.
Okay, this is great. We're moving right along.
We're totally on topic.
I want to talk. Okay, so this is why I invited you here, not just for like a great dinner and a great time, because you always are, but I really want to talk tonight on this episode about our refugee crisis. Would you call it a crisis?
That's a contentious thing, actually. Yeah, there's a lot of debate over whether you should call it a crisis or not.
Okay. So I'm going to say refugee crisis, and
Go for it.
That's going to be my opinion. And then I really want to hear from you, like, what is going on in this country right now? What is the current state for refugees who are trying to come to this country and for immigrants? And then we're going to just talk about the role of food and like what this means. What role does food play as people leave a country and come to a new country and try to establish new home and all of that? So I'm so glad you're here because I've wanted to talk about this for a while, and you're the expert. So tell us what's going on in this country. Like, what is happening?
No, it's a crazy time right now. And the reason I started off with saying like the crisis question mark is because I think we're at a crisis point. We are at a crisis point, but it's because of policy. And so we're not actually, like, when people try to blow it up for the argument of, oh, it's too many people, we can't handle it. We actually have manageable numbers of people that are moving right now. And you could say that in Europe, you could say that in the US. And so when you say there's a crisis, it's because it's being manufactured to be a crisis. People didn't always used to be, if you're looking at the U.S. context of people coming across the border, I'll go right out. I mean, the Trump administration has been abominable. I mean, it's disgusting what's going on at the border, and I can talk more about that, just from a sheer human rights perspective, but also from like security, economic standpoint, like all of those things, it's disastrous. The crisis is the way it's being handled. The way, I mean, not just family separation, not just putting children in detention. All of that is horrific on its own. But it's a complete mismanagement of the situation. So we're actually, if you look at like the long-term chart of the numbers of people who are coming, we're actually at a reasonable, I mean, it's not even close to the highest spikes that we've seen in recent decades. And so I think the crisis is really of our morality and a policy perspective. And the same is true, you could say, in Europe, when there were so many Syrians coming through Greece and there was that whole crisis. Europe sounded the alarm. We're having a crisis. This is an emergency. And people used that as fodder for making more restrictive policies and saying it's like they're coming to get us, And actually an interesting, putting on my academic hat, like there's been a lot of studies on the language and rhetoric we use about refugees. People often compare them to a natural disaster, waves of people, swarms of people flooding across the border that evokes this like, they're coming to get us. It's this scary like tsunami of people coming, as opposed to things that refer to people as human beings, and it's really not this big like scary swarm of people coming to get us all. I mean, that just isn't supported by the data and the statistics. And yes, when you round everyone up and stick them in detention, which by the way is also really expensive, even if you don't care about people's human suffering, and logistically is ridiculous, then you can manufacture it to look like this horrific crisis. So I think, that was a long-winded way of saying we are in a really terrible situation, but a lot of it is just driven by our sheer poor policy choices. And I'll say, that lies squarely at the feet of the Trump administration. Not that, I mean, there were a lot of really messed up policies under the Obama administration too, and over the past decades. But certainly it's much, much worse under the Trump administration.
I've never thought about that before. Like I'm listening to I'm doing my best to listen to like the language and, the rhetoric that's put out there. Of course, when it's obvious, it's obvious. But I've never thought about that before, like swarms and floods. Like
if you listen, especially people who are anti-refugee, will use that a lot.
That's so interesting.
And I mean, go and like look at some of these kids. Like these kids are not a danger to our country. And I mean, just generally, like migration and movement is important to keeping economies thriving. Like we depend on that economically. So, I think that's part of the picture. I think the general discriminatory rhetoric in this country toward people who are not white has reached just a fever pitch. It's beyond polarizing right now. And that's also, I mean, there's populist governments around the world that you're hearing that from. That's not just under this administration, but it's really taken an ugly turn. And it's a hard time in the U.S. to be a refugee advocate right now. But there's never been a more important time because asylum is directly under threat. The very things the principles that we uphold, that people deserve to find safe refuge, period, end of story. That, refugees actually do have a lot to contribute to this country. There was some study out, and I don't remember the exact figure, but it was a large, large number of the owners of Fortune 500 companies in the U.S. were refugees or immigrants and of that descent. So, a lot of the arguments of they're just coming to use all our welfare resources, I mean, these arguments just don't hold water. They really don't. So yeah, but it's a heartbreaking time at the border right now. It's a really heartbreaking time. You've been in this work so long. Like, what is the difference? I would imagine, I'm not in it like you are, of course, day to day, but like, what is the difference now with the administration than Obama or other previous administrations? Like, what, do you see a difference? I think the biggest thing is the really strong effort to curb or completely get rid of people's access to asylum. So like we have on the books, the refugee laws in this country are that if you come and you claim asylum, it doesn't mean you get it. It doesn't mean you get to stay, but it means you go through a legal process, that your claim is heard. And that comes all the way out of straight out of Jews fleeing Nazi Germany, World War II, people fleeing for their lives, people needing refuge and safety. And so then we took those like norms and laws and made them part of our own national law. And that's a distinctly I mean, it's not distinctly American. A lot of countries have done that, but we have our own laws. And so I think the efforts to keep people from accessing asylum, whether it's you have to stay in Mexico, whether it's the latest stuff about, making people apply in Guatemala, places where people probably cannot find the safe refuge that we would consider to be protection for them. That's probably the biggest thing. And the asylum system, because of the way they've set it up, has not been receiving the research. There aren't enough judges. There aren't enough people reviewing asylum claims. To be fair, I should say I don't actually usually work on the U.S. side of things. It's just gotten so dire now. Usually I'm focused on Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Like that's where more of my work tends to be focused. But as of late, it's just gotten so dire that a lot of us who tend to work in much more difficult circumstances are looking at the U.S. now because it's hard to believe. I mean, this is the U.S. in 2019. It's really hard to believe. And it's a sad state. So
could you have ever imagined, like in your work, that you would see something like this?
Not the detention side of it, for sure. I mean, like detaining people is not new under the Trump administration, but on this scale and scope, it really is. And I'm leading a team down there in a few weeks, and just hearing what like physicians and pediatricians have said coming back, just the conditions they're shocking. And these are people who are not new to this work, like people who've worked all over the world, who've worked with kids who've been, tortured and turned into soldiers and stuff. And for them to be saying that in the United States in 2019, we're doing this to children with like our tax dollars is really, it's really hard to believe.
I feel like physically nauseous as you say that would
be. Oh,
the
the stuff. Yeah.
That pediatricians would be saying that.
No, it's really terrible. And the trauma that's being done to kids is unforgivable, I would say.
Yeah, unforgivable. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
What does an average person like me do? Like, it's so heartbreaking. I don't want to look, right, at the images. I don't want to read the paper. I don't want to watch the news. But it's like I just can't not, right? And my privilege allows me to like not look.
Well, and it feels so big. It's like, how do you stop this? I mean,
and it's like, what do I actually
the Trump administration to change the policy, and what do we do in the meantime? Yeah, I mean, there are actually some good lists out there where there's, of course, you can like call your congressman, and you can write letters. You can give money to some of the organizations that are doing good work, like Kind Kids in Need of Defense, or IESE's got a lot last year under the family separation situation. So there are good things like that, and I think keeping the public outrage elevated is important. I mean, I don't pretend to understand like the Trump psyche. I mean, you remember a year ago when the child separations were happening, and then there was the public outcry, and then he wanted to kind of proclaim himself the one who saved everyone and, stopped the policy. Well, then actually today the ACLU came out with new figures that said, no, there's been tons of separations that have still been happening, just under 1,000. But I think on one hand, he kind of loves that public outrage and kind of feeds off of it. On the other hand, like it's the only way to kind of move the needle, because if these families are forgotten and no one's advocating for them, there are lots of people working on the issue. But the elections, me, that's what this is about. I mean, this is an issue I care deeply about. And until Trump is out of office, it's hard to see the policies changing a lot.
Yeah.
Another actually kind of side note thing that people often don't get excited about because it doesn't seem sexy is people who really work on this all the time. They say one of the things they actually need is bail money, because a lot of times when families are separated, they're saying, okay, well, let's prosecute the mom for crossing illegally, which a lot of politicians are saying, well, let's not make that something where you have to like go to jail. It would be like a misdemeanor or something as opposed to, but so right now they're separated and the mom or the dad or whoever is having to wait in jail and they can't make bail. And so one of the ways, if you want to reunite families, is to help these organizations pay their bail to get mom or dad out of jail, who can then reclaim their kid and be together. That's assuming they've actually kept track of which kids go with which parents, which is a whole frightening thing on its own. So that's another thing that people don't always get excited about, because like bail money doesn't exactly seem like that fun, but that's an important piece if you talk to
where's a good place, what's a organization you could trust to like
so there are lots of good like lawyer groups that are like connecting. I mean, I think Kind Kids in Need of Defense, I think KIND, I don't know I would have
we
to check.
Can post. Yeah, we'll post
Yeah,
on
you
the
can
show
check.
notes on the
And
episode
Raices
page.
does a lot of legal assistance too. A lot of these legal groups are really what they need.
Right.
It's the lawyers who are going to have to wear the lawyers and judges are really the ones wearing the capes and saving the day on this.
Absolutely.
Which for those of us who work in humanitarian situations elsewhere, is kind of like, what? Like that's not that exciting, like they, just kind of sitting with their paperwork is how you envision them. But like, I think in this case, it's the lawyers who are the ones really doing the day in and day out.
Yeah. I mean, we're hearing the stories of the kids who are having to like defend themselves in court, right?
It's ridiculous.
So, I mean, what are we even talking about that would be a thing?
No, it's
so right. The lawyers.
Mess.
I love how you said that. The lawyers are the ones with the super capes.
Yeah.
The super capes. What's a super cape?
A really special cape.
Really special cape. That's who these people are.
Exactly.
No, I love that idea. Like finding organizations where you can send money for lawyers and their time, and then also the bail money. That's just I just feel like myself, so many of my friends, so many people I know are just dying to do something, and it feels impossible. And I feel like with Trump, like that is even some of the strategy is with so many of the issues is to overwhelm and bombard so that you feel a sense of hopelessness. Yeah. And like it's
too big.
There's too many things to focus on.
And
I can't do anything.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna like, if you have privilege, be able to just like turn off Twitter, turn off the TV. And we just can't. We cannot, especially those of us with privilege, like we cannot do that. We have to take care of ourselves and take breaks and like be in this for the long haul, right? But we cannot look away.
No,
and we have to
and I mean,
do what we can. We have to do what we have to give what resources and time and
this
energy
isn't
we have.
the other side of the world. I mean, this is Texas, Arizona, like this is the U.S. I mean, that's crazy. And we also, to that point, also need to keep caring about the rest of the world too. It's very easy to feel like it's an either or. And I always get really irked when people make things like even in church missions and stuff where they try to make it like, we should only do local mission. I was like, it's not an either or. Like we can love our neighbor across an ocean and we can love our neighbor in the house next door to us. Like it's not, we are actually well off enough that we can do both. Like we can do international things and we can do local domestic. So I think that's just kind of another relevant piece.
So good, Sarah. So let's talk about food. What have you seen as the role of food in refugee communities? I think about when people are forced to leave their home and what a traumatic, horrible experience that must be. People who maybe don't want to leave their home, right? Yeah. Come to this country and have to re-establish a sense of home and centeredness and a safe place for their kids and family. What have you seen?
Yeah.
Like what role does food have as they come to this country and maybe like bring their tradition of food with them?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great way to kind of enter the world of refugees and displacement because it helps you think about, I mean, like us, I think for people who are displaced, like food is part of your identity. It's part of your culture. It's part of your comfort. It's your go-to. It's what you know. And I mean, I won't talk about the cases where, there's actual famine going on and stuff because that's a whole different situation of food, like people just not having enough. But some of the places I'm focusing on right now, like Yemen, people they're starving. I mean, children are horribly malnourished. But in terms of kind of the journey of a lot of refugees, and specifically thinking about resettlement, I kind of go back to, interestingly, my kind of case management days with World Relief. And some of the early days when we would be resettling families who were coming to the U.S., they'd been like gone through this long process of vetting, and they would land at O'Hare, often in like freezing cold, like February from, Thailand, a refugee camp, and be freezing. And it would be my job to help, pick up the family, get winter coats on them, like buckle the kids into a car seat, which like was not culturally normal to a lot of people, and take them to their new apartment. And a lot of times I felt like it was like always late at night and stuff. But one of the first things that we had to arrange was the meal that would be waiting for them. And there were always lots of like American volunteers, but we always tried really hard to have the meal come from someone in their own community who'd already been there. So they would have a meal with some kind of familiarity, kind of cultural appropriateness, something that
familiar.
would welcome them.
Oh my
Because
gosh,
otherwise,
I have like goosebumps.
because
It's
well,
so
and,
beautiful.
and when you get there, like you're giving them the orientation. Here's how you use the garbage disposal. Here's how you flush the toilet. Here's how, because
Yeah.
like, I mean, depending on the country they're coming from, they might not be familiar with like a regular standard apartment. And so those were some of the first things we had to arrange. And having something that was culturally appropriate was always the first thing. So it would often be a way also to kind of connect them with the rest of the refugee community. Kind of a linkage there. And then, you know, it also comes to mind like taking people grocery shopping for the first time, teaching them, like this was also when like self-checkout was becoming a thing, but like doing like the produce and like all this stuff and getting people like their type of rice, like that's really important. The food really is the central thing. And then, you know, as people become more integrated in their communities, become more comfortable, you have these great opportunities of like sharing, you know, like people inviting you over for a meal. And of course we were talking earlier about how important that is. So, and the resettlement end, I think that's one of the most important and one of the most fun ways to like connect with refugees in your community. Assuming the Trump administration still lets refugees come to the U.S. But that's kind of one of the really neat ways that people connect. So
that's so beautiful. I feel like it's such a thoughtful thing to do. The very first meal that someone would have is from their community and from their country, and that's just so thoughtful.
It's a place of pride too. I mean, like of course when you're overseas in people's communities, like that's one of the first things too. People want to serve you a meal, whether it's, you know, just on the floor of their hut or you know, somewhere else, restaurant, whatever. I mean, that's always like how people are bonding. Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a minute. You've been everywhere. Is there somewhere you haven't been, actually?
Many places.
Okay, name one.
Oh, well. Afghanistan.
Okay, great. There's
North Korea.
Two. Okay.
A lot of people have been in
You've been everywhere else. So how have you experienced hospitality and food in other countries? Like as you've traveled, like just tell us like a beautiful story of experiencing the table and the magic of food and somewhere that you've been.
Yeah. Like in the Middle East, I think is what stands out first and foremost, because people have such a strong sense of like hospitality and like come and sit and stay with me. I've eaten so much good baklava. I don't know. I actually have stories of like more like when I've been lost and like someone has come and like,
really?
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know. I think I'm pretty good at directions, but this is like pre-GPS or something. And people kind of like have gone out of their way to like, this one woman I remember, it might've been in Tanzania. I feel like I was in a town that was like 2 towns over from ours, and I was walking with this other girl. This is all very fuzzy. And we kind of like couldn't find our way back. We'd like started in the market and then we couldn't find our way back. And she like I thought she was just going to like point us in the right direction, but then she had us come sit and we had tea and we had some of the chapati bread and we sat and, I mean, my one friend who speaks better Swahili than I did, like, you know, we had this great conversation and it was just those moments, the unexpectedness of it too, of kind of bringing us in. I remember having like roasted goat on the side of a like street in Burundi and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm for sure going to get sick from this. And I remember just sitting with like a group of like some of my colleagues, like some Burundian men who were just like, kind of just like these old like knee slapping kind of guys, you know, and it's like you just get your like roasted goat on a stick and you're going to sit there. And that was on one of these convoys we took when we were on a refugee repatriation. There were Burundians returning from Tanzania to Burundi. And I remember eating, and it was delicious. It was like really like garlicky and like kind of fatty, I guess, but like really maybe bristly too. But the flavor was really great. Not something you would have served tonight as your new vegetarian route, but just I think it also puts people at ease when you have those moments.
Yes,
it puts you at ease in a way that doesn't just happen when you're sitting. Talking in an office or you're sitting talking over, I don't know, a cup of coffee or something. And I think maybe it's also the piece of like someone is going out of their way for you. Someone is, it's a sense of welcome in a different way.
Yes.
So
I mean, I would imagine not being in all of the places that you've been, I would just imagine like, even though ingredients are different and cooking styles are different, flavors are different and all that, it's still like the magic and connective nature of food. Wherever you are. Right?
Yeah. And like, there's always a sense of curiosity too. And this almost like, to be cheesy, but like kind of a shared humanity, like, oh, they do that too. Oh, they like that too. Oh, like she sits and cooks dinner, you know, kind of this like dawning on you, like, oh, everybody around the world is like trying to figure out what they're going to have for dinner tonight and like, what am I going to feed everybody, you know? And I think there is kind of a connectivity there. I don't know, but also a fun kind of curiosity. Yeah.
I love that. Curiosity, right. Food should be approached with a curiosity, right?
Yeah, well, I was thinking earlier, I was trying to remember one of the first places I stayed in Thailand was along the Thai-Burma border in this house that took in girls who had either been like trafficked or they were at risk. And so it was like a home for girls. And I think I've told you about that. It was run by these like ridiculous American missionaries that were like everything a missionary should not be. It was like the worst, like took like no interest in the girls' lives, like no interest in like Thai culture, Thai food, Thai people, Thai language. Like it was just the opposite. Yeah. I'm circling back to the relevant part here because there was this Sangla was her name, this like house mom. And she was essentially what I would call like, I mean, she was like the lay pastor. Like she took care of these girls. She would sing with them at night. They would, you know, do Bible study and prayer. This Thai woman who was like the house mom, the way she took care of these girls, they all took turns cooking. I remember sitting outside with her and watching her with like the mortar and pestle, like do like ground the chili pepper because it was so spicy.
Oh my gosh.
And like she would have the girls all take different turns. And like I also like I hadn't had a lot of like really spicy food. It was that real fresh, like great Thai spicy stuff. And so I remember watching her like curiously because I'd never, you know, in like my like ramen noodles days, like never like ground a chili pepper like properly. And then the first few nights that I would eat, they started saying like pisom, pisom, pisom. And I was like, what is that? And like finally someone translated, it was like she who gets like so orange or red because I was having all this spicy food. So I was like the red faced person. Yeah. But I loved that. I mean, and that was kind of something that was a real moment of kind of curiosity, but also entering their world. Like that was a big part of the day and like getting up early and like taking turns preparing breakfast. And yeah, it was kind of an interesting first connection to the culture. Yeah. And sticky rice. Sticky rice is good.
So good,
sticky
right?
Rice is good. Yeah.
I love to, I just imagine, I always think food too as memory, right? Like because it's so sensory, it takes you back, right? Yes. So even as like you're telling these stories, I can see in your eyes, like it's just, you're like, it's like taking you back to that time.
It does.
Those people and the places. I just love that about food.
It's a feeling. Yeah. That evokes that memory strongly. Yeah,
brings you back. Sarah, I love you so much. This has been awesome. I want to finish with a quick question.
We're already done.
I know, right?
We really could be a 3-hour one.
It really could, guys. I want to know the best Chicago restaurant. Okay, because you are a Chicago girl through and through, and you will be back here someday because I'm a prophet, and I just declared that over your life.
Yay.
But do what you want to do.
I love it.
Right now, you live way too far away from me. But what would you say is the best Chicago area restaurant?
I love it.
Like everybody must eat at.
Okay. Yes, I'm going to cheat and do like Chicago area.
That's fine.
It's not in Chicago. So I was thinking about this. And Sean and I are big fans of Gianni's. Gianni's is like
yes.
Is like
Kelly's nodding.
Great
Tell everyone how much Kelly's nodding.
It's like just great old school Italian, but it's so good.
There's like what suburb is it in? Arlington?
So they had one in there's still the one in Palatine. I think the Palatine not there anymore. Right? Yeah, it's in Palatine. A great little Italian place. And we had like our rehearsal dinner there, and it's always we'll probably go there this week since we're in town visiting.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, it's just the best. It's just really good. Sean likes to pour a good martini. But it's just the pasta spectacular. What is that one we always like? Country rigatoni.
Oh yeah!
Right?
Oh my gosh!
We're like ready for the next
meal. Salivating.
It's so good. Yeah.
We were introduced to it at your rehearsal dinner, which was good. So much fun. And then I feel like we ate there, for like months.
That's so fun. Oh my gosh. It is really good.
This has been so much fun. We need a whole second episode to just keep telling all of our stories.
I love it.
You've been an amazing friend to me for so many years.
Right back at you.
A special shout out to you on a previous podcast, on our infertility podcast, when we talked about people who really were there for us you've been there for us every day in our infertility journey. And when we would go to the bar on Friday nights, I think Kelly mentioned in an episode
that again.
Yeah, I don't think it's there anymore. But
any bar will do. Doesn't have to be that one.
Kelly, I think, mentioned this in the episode that there were just some weeks he was living for Friday nights where we would see you two and you would ask us what was going on and how we were doing.
That. I mean,
and then we'd have a Cosmo +2 or whatever. That's where I really learned to drink, to love Cosmos.
And their little like pink drinks.
People roll their eyes at me sometimes now when I order Cosmos, and I'm like, guys, have you had it?
I know.
So good.
And it's low-cal. Isn't that the whole thing?
It is?
I think that's the whole reason it was big on Sex and the City, wasn't it? I never watched that show.
Well, it's even more special.
I know. They're
than
delicious. No, they're great. No, but we were honored to be able to walk with you guys through all that. And like, I mean, we've been cheering you guys on all along. And like likewise, like you guys have been walking with us through all these years too. So
well, thank you. Your
we're
friendship
grateful.
Means so much.
Thank you,
I'm
guys.
so glad you're here.
We miss you.
Please move back to Chicago soon.
I know. No, I just talked about all the restaurants. I'm like, okay, we got to go to all these restaurants. There's a surprising dearth of, can I say dearth? Like a lack of.
I feel like that's a curse word.
I feel like dearth is one of those words I've always used wrong. Like I used to say it like meant like a lot, and I think it actually means only a little.
You mean like girth?
This is where Sean is like, she has a doctorate from Oxford.
We should wrap this up, Sarah.
Dearth and girth. There is a surprising dearth of good restaurants in Greenwich. Like there's not that many good restaurants. I could just say it like that. Is this going to get edited out, Kelly?
All right, everyone. Sarah, it's been awesome.
Thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming.
We're lucky to have you.
Same.